Derek's shout echoed through the area, capturing everyone's attention. His frustration was palpable as he glared at Azadine, who remained calm, nonchalantly holding an apple, seemingly unaffected by the outburst. Azadine raised an eyebrow and asked coolly, "Derek, do you really have the authority for this?" Derek, incensed, shot back, his voice sharp and full of accusation, "What is that supposed to mean? Are you implying I'm overstepping my bounds? We can safeguard the copy of the Book of the Divine King far better than someone as powerless as you." Azadine, still composed, responded while examining the apple in his hand, "No, I was thinking it might be wiser to give it to the district chief. Besides, I encountered some trouble on my way here." "Derek, don't you think it would be more challenging for you?" "Trouble?" Derek inquired, his curiosity piqued. Taking a deliberate bite from his apple, Azadine continued, "It involved one of Count Castle's illegitimate sons. He's been plundering gateway villages with a mercenary group. There are even members of the Herald Clan with them." Derek scoffed, "So you got scared and ran here?" Azadine replied calmly, "It's not about fear. However, they're bound to attack eventually." Derek, his pride bruised, gestured to himself and retorted, "Ha, do you think we'd lose to them? I might have been defeated by a rail once, but remember, I am a former herald." Azadine, taking another bite of his apple, said with a hint of concern, "You think it's not a problem? You're willing to fight, then? The merchants of the Coruscant Peddler Guild have shown their true colors. Rumors like these could undermine the merchant guild you've worked so hard to establish. Am I wrong?" Derek, visibly impatient, snapped back, "That's irrelevant. The priority is to protect the copy of the Book of the Divine King." He pointed accusingly at Azadine, adding, "Besides, you're far weaker than a rail." Azadine, massaging his temples, sighed, "You're still talking about our childhood." As Derek ranted on, Azadine's mind wandered to his past conflicts with a rail. "Back then, I was no match for a rail. I've grown much stronger since, but a rail today, she's the most formidable warrior among us, revered by countless followers. It's been years since I last saw her. I can't even begin to imagine her current strength." Derek interrupted, "I'm not interested in the past. Just hand it over now, so we can ensure its safety. Unless you want to risk losing a fortune you were merely lucky to find." Azadine nodded slightly, his voice firm, "I'd rather not hand it over to you, Derek. I'll discuss this with the district chief later." Frustrated, Derek slammed his hand on the table, his anger boiling over, "This is ridiculous. You can't protect it with your skills. You've just been fooling around these last 3 months without doing anything worthy of a herald." Resentment simmered in Derek's tone as he faced Azadine. "No? I've been saving people here and there," Azadine retorted calmly. "You foolish man. How can you utter such naiveties?" Derek exploded. "Our real tasks should be to obliterate rival guilds, assassinate our adversaries, and even torch their storehouses to manipulate market prices." The chasm in their understanding of a messenger's duties seemed vast. Azadine shook his head, his frustration evident. "Considering our stark differences, I see no point in this discussion. I certainly won't be handing it over to you." "You impudent youth," Derek sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "Aren't you 2 years my junior? How dare you speak to me with such insolence?" Indeed, Derek had been forced into retirement after a defeat by a rail, and it galled him that Azadine, a blood relative of his conqueror, stood so defiantly before him. As the tension between them escalated, their voices growing louder as each pressed his point, an unexpected interruption occurred. Before Derek could continue, a soldier burst into the tent, his expression fraught with urgency. Panting heavily, he managed to gasp out, "Yes, sir, we have a problem." Both men turned sharply to face him as he hurriedly added, "It's the eastern gates." The scene transitioned to earlier that day at the eastern gates of a bustling post town, where a group of soldiers, clad in basic armor and wielding spears, stood guard. Among them, a prominent figure with a scar on his lip took the lead, Sir Jaren, a young knight financially beholden to Count Salasma and the 25-year-old son of a nearby baron. Though still the heir in title, Sir Jaren's position was precarious, his father showed no signs of passing, and his stepmother's influence was growing. With his mother deceased since his adolescence and a half-brother potentially supplanting him, Jaren felt the acute pressure to secure his future, which led him to leverage his position at the gates for personal gain, often accepting bribes to ease the passage of merchants. As Sir Jaren's sharp gaze swept across the horizon, he noticed an unsettling movement, a considerable force approaching. It was Tarki, the notorious illegitimate son of Count Castle, accompanied by his band of mercenaries. The sight of the armed contingent set Jaren on edge. Are they armed?" Jaren muttered to himself as he scrutinized the approaching group. As Tarki and his mercenaries drew closer, Jaren stepped up decisively, raising his hand to stop them. "Wait," he commanded. "There are too many of you to pass through right now. Camp elsewhere and return tomorrow." Despite his firm stance, Sir Jaren's command was not just about maintaining order, it was also a thinly veiled hint at his openness to negotiation. Tarki, understanding the subtext, responded with a chuckle and a disarming smile, pulling out a pouch of coins. "Nana. Good work, Sir Jaren," he said, advancing with a casual air. As expected, Tarki extended the bag of money towards Jaren, adding in a low, conspiratorial tone, "Take this as a token of our appreciation for your hard work." Jaren eyed the bag with a mix of suspicion and temptation. You're putting me in a difficult position here, Sir Tarki," he replied, his instincts tingling with the potential consequences of this bribe. "You're a knight, too," Tarki pointed out, his voice tinged with unease as he tried to quell his own apprehensions. "If we both commit wrongdoing, won't we end up at the king's church?" Tarki continued, attempting to persuade Jaren by highlighting their shared risks. "Please, see this as a situation where we're both on the same side." Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Tarki, his mercenary boss subtly unsheathed his sword behind him, a sinister grin creeping across his face as his keen eyes fixed on Captain Jaren, ready to act should the need arise. As Sir Jaren reluctantly accepted the pouch of money from Tarki, he permitted the group entry through the gate. "Well, if you say so. I guess he began, his voice trailing off with a hint of resignation. However, before Jaren could complete his thought, the scene took a sudden and violent turn. The mercenaries' leader, with chilling precision, swung his sword. The blade sliced through the air, striking Jaren directly in the eye. With one clean and fatal slash, Jaren collapsed lifelessly to the ground, his body crumpling into the dirt as blood began to seep into the soil around him. The guards, stunned by the swift brutality, watched in horror. The mercenaries wasted no time, turning their weapons on the remaining guards and cutting them down with ruthless efficiency. Panic ensued as Tarki, witnessing the unexpected escalation, took a shaky step back. "Hey, I didn't want him dead," he stammered, his voice filled with fear and confusion. He had only intended to detain Jaren, not to kill him. Yet, the mercenary captain, indifferent to Tarki's intentions, delivered the fatal blow without hesitation. With a casual yet malevolent smirk, he replied, "You should be happy, young master. A raid is no fun if we don't do this much." The captain's laugh was mean and devoid of remorse as he surveyed the campsite near the gate's entrance. "Take it easy," he advised with a cruel twist of his lips. "Shouldn't there be a lot of distance we need to cover and loot? You will be making a huge fortune." His true intention was clear, he sought control of the gateway, especially now that he had lost the staff necessary to locate the magic book. "First, let's kill the station attendant and seize it," he instructed coldly. "You don't have to engage with the merchant guards immediately to loot them. It is important to get control of the town first." Tarki, still reeling from the swift turn of events, protested, "You're making it too difficult for yourself. There are 3 gates here." Unfazed and exuding confidence, the mercenary's boss turned to him with a dismissive wave of his hand. "That's not something to worry about. We have more than enough power to do it," he declared, his arrogance apparent in his tone, setting a grim tone for their ruthless campaign. As the mercenary captain spread his hands, a black spot on his palm began to shine ominously. From it, a spider crawled forth, its legs twitching eerily. With a deliberate puff of breath, he sent the spider scattering into countless tiny arachnids that skittered across the ground toward the assembled soldiers and mercenaries. Startled, the mercenaries tried in vain to dodge the spiders, which danced through the air and made contact with their skin. These spiders, the size of millet grains, released a substance that targeted their armpits and groin areas. It quickly became apparent that these were not ordinary spiders, many more had been living within their bodies, feeding on their blood and flesh for a long time. "You won't be able to shake them off," the captain declared ominously. "In fact, they've all grown up by feeding on you." Screams of agony filled the air as the infected soldiers writhed. The mercenaries, now terrified, tried desperately to remove the spiders, but to no avail. The spiders emerged relentlessly from their hair and skin, and when they touched the ground, they began to glow with a soft green light. The light shared by the spider that the captain had released seemed to signal the others, which then re-entered the mercenaries' bodies, shining with an eerie green glow. "I told you," the captain said grimly, watching as his victims' bodies began to mutate into monstrous forms. One of the mercenaries, transformed into a zombified husk with glowing green eyes, groaned with unnatural power. "I am full of power." Frozen in shock, Tarki pointed a trembling finger at the captain, stuttering, You're a curt heretic." The captain's smirk twisted into a wicked grin. "Ah, you must be so clever to realize it now," he mocked. He stepped closer to Tarki, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Now, let us cooperate. You don't want to be dragged into the church, right? Manage the money carefully and get revenge on the count who abandoned and insulted you. I need to get my hands on a copy of that book. Isn't it nice to help each other?" Before Tarki could reply, the boss exhaled sharply, causing Tarki's body to convulse. He collapsed to the ground, clutching his grotesquely swollen abdomen, groaning in pain. "You don't have a choice here," the boss said cruelly as he looked down at Tarki. "The Kurd isn't the only threat around here. We are more flexible than the king's church." Now powerless, Tarki watched as his zombified soldiers, their eyes glowing an eerie green, moved with terrifying speed to carry out their master's command. "No one leaves this village," he ordered through clenched teeth. The green-eyed soldiers dispersed in all directions, sealing the fate of the village under the moonlit sky. "Get the rat," the boss snarled, orchestrating a dark symphony of control and terror. The scene shifted to the gates, where merchants, in a state of panic, attempted to flee. One merchant shouted, "Why can't we leave?" An imposing soldier, standing 8 feet tall with glowing green eyes, stepped forward, effectively blocking their path. His voice was unnaturally deep and menacing as he declared, "Because we said so." Behind him, a shimmering green barrier loomed ominously, cutting off any hope of escape. Desperation crept into the voice of another merchant who yelled, "Move. I'm heading out." However, the monstrous soldier grasped him by the face, lifting him effortlessly off the ground. With a hiss, the soldier tightened his grip and stated, "I said, no one is allowed to leave." The crowd of merchants looked on in horror, frozen in place as the zombie-like soldier examined the man in its grasp. It muttered, its glowing eyes narrowing, "But something is strange." Echoing the sentiment, another soldier stepped closer, adding, "Yes, strange." Drool began to spill from the monstrous soldier's mouth, its hunger palpable. It opened its maw unnaturally wide, revealing spider-like fangs. Tiny spiders crawled from its hands as the captive merchant squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the worst. Suddenly, an arrow pierced the zombie's face, causing it to stagger. Confused, the merchant opened his eyes just in time to see a figure land gracefully on the zombie's back. A sword glinted in the moonlight before being plunged decisively into the monster's skull. The merchant fell to the ground, trembling, and looked up to see Azadine standing tall, wielding a long spear. As tiny spiders began to scurry over the zombie's lifeless body, Azadine's sharp gaze tracked their movements. He muttered to himself, "They're subordinates of the Spider Queen. Arthra." His presence and quick action brought a brief moment of relief amidst the chaos at the gates.